I'm Louise Levy. Pleased to meet you all. We have a big attendance at this webinar today, which I'm delighted about. We're just in the process of letting everyone in. So if you can bear with us just for a couple of minutes, if that's okay, and we'll get cracking shortly. We just want to make sure everyone has the opportunity of coming in. So 2 seconds. Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to the webinar today on behalf of Education Mutual. I'm Louise Levy, I'm a Director of Education Mutual. And what I really need to say to everyone, first things first, is wow, well done. We've managed it. We've actually been able to stick to the calendar invite and ensure we attended today. No interruptions. You've actually been able to put your own CPD first, and that doesn't happen very often. I know that. And we've had the determination to escape the relentless demands of our roles in schools for just an hour to invest in our learning for the benefit of the children and the other staff in schools as well as ourselves. And I bet at least half of the attendees have had a wobble over yesterday and today about whether we'd actually get here today or whether we needed to cancel because something else has come up. But you're here, so thank you for that. And I'll try and be a sensible sponsor too, but I am just a bit excited that we've got so many friends and colleagues across the country here together. And that's how I tell you a little bit about myself. Whilst being a Director of Education Mutual, I'm also a school business leader myself. I'm a Chief Operating Officer of Bishop Wilkinson Catholic Education Trust, and we're a large MAT in the northeast of 47 primary and secondary schools. We cover 4 different local authorities, so we know the quirks of different local authorities and have 2,000 staff, and the joys and the problems and issues that brings. And we rapidly grew from a single academy trust in 2019 to 47 in 2021. Absolute madness doing it that quickly, but all worthwhile, and a great family of schools we now have. So, as you know, school business leaders never say no to additional work. So when I was asked to help with the development and setup of Education Mutual, of course, like all of us, I jumped at the chance. And Education Mutual has been in existence since July 2018. And as you can imagine, when we were planning what we wanted Education Mutual to look like as a group of business managers and head teachers, um, we had a business plan and it looked quite straightforward. The objective was good. We wanted to make sure that our new venture meant that we had member schools who received a high quality service, had fair decisions made, And also any surplus profits remained within the education sector. And we do that. And COVID hit as a massive curveball in the middle, which was something that none of us could actually anticipate. And we wanted to come up with an alternative staff absence protection solution for schools, and we did just that. So we're very proud of that. We're already the second largest absence provider. And come to the absences, that's why we want to help the schools and the staff within schools, of which we have many, to actually look at how we make sure our workforce is looked after and feels valued. And this report, I hope that you'll be able to see lots of things that we can actually help our staff with. And now we know some of the issues that we're experiencing, then we can do things about it. So thank you to Sinead, who I'll introduce to you in a second, for actually coming up with that. Also, as school business leaders, what I wanted to say is that we don't get any reward for being part of the board of Educational Mutual. So I just wanted to put that related party transaction notification out there. We do it because we think it's the right thing to do. And I mean that very much. And hopefully you can see how ingrained a school business leader I am, and how my two very different roles are intermingled every day. So I just wanted to really welcome you all, to convey that there are so many opportunities for the successes of our schools and yourselves and business leaders within the schools, because ultimately we do, and I always say this, everything other than teaching. And sometimes we'll probably even do that as well. But we are just that in schools. In the central team within our multi-academy trust, we call our team the Essential Services team. So whether that's HR, finance, commercial, governance, they're all part of the Essential Services team. And that's how our schools now see them. But most importantly, so does each and every staff member within the Essential Services team, because that's the message. So we are all just that. Everybody here today, we're all essential to the education sector. So don't feel guilty for having this CPD today. Don't feel guilty for enjoying it. I hope you will. It's therapy. It's much needed. And don't feel guilty for having a hot cup of coffee, because ultimately I know that we make them and they stand on our desks while other people come in the office. So I hope you've locked the door and you can have a cup of coffee, because actually you'll be a better leader for taking that time to do it. So I just want to introduce Sinead, say thank you so much for preparing this report, this independent report, the mental health and wellbeing of school business leaders. Sinead will be happy to take any questions raised after her presentation. And following Sinead's discussion, we've got two school business leader colleagues who will be able to take part in a brief panel discussion. They've had their arms put up their backs to say, please join this presentation. But if you have any questions that you wish to have answered, please just feel free to add them to the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those. I'll do my best, not being the best IT person, to actually look at the chat and see what's coming up as we go through. But thank you. I sincerely mean, thank you for attending. Hopefully you'll get a lot out of today's session. But if you do have any questions, then we'll try and answer those as best we can too. Thank you. Sinead.
Thanks a million, Louise, for the kind introduction, and delighted to be with you here today to launch the report. I'm the Chief Executive at Education Support, and as a charity, we've been around for almost 150 years, supporting the well-being of everyone working in education. And we do that in a variety of ways. We help individuals by providing free counselling. We provide welfare support and grants to those who are in financial distress. We also work with schools to help make schools better workplaces for everybody who's employed there. And finally, we research the health and well-being of the workforce and try to use the findings of that work to influence policymakers to make changes where we think those changes will reduce stress or improve the well-being of the workforce. So that's just a quick overview of where I'm coming from in this. And our team, our research team here, we're really engaged in this whole piece of work, talking to school business leaders and trying to understand more about your experience. So thank you to Education Mutual for supporting us with that. But the team's had I know, a really interesting journey through this work. And I'm not going to get into all of the charts and graphs that are in that research report. I'll let you peruse those at your own leisure. But let me draw just some of the highlights out, and then we can have some conversation. I know Alison and Debbie will be able to bring a lot of this to life. I guess the main findings in terms of drivers of stress for the school business leader community are, unsurprisingly, workload, top of the list. We all will have seen that coming. Understanding the role is an issue for people. And actually what the research team said as they were going through this work was, it's not that uniformly the role isn't understood. Actually, the role in some places is incredibly well understood. There are leaders and colleagues in schools who know precisely what school business professionals are doing to keep schools operating well. It's just that that's not even. There are other pockets where colleagues seem to be a bit clueless about what school business leaders and school business managers are doing. So there's a lot of variation in that. But that lack of understanding of the role is stressful to colleagues. Dealing with funding and the lack of resources in the sector comes up time and again. And obviously in your roles, you're at the sharp end of trying to make the numbers balance and find creative ways to make resources go further. And that again is different for people who are working in a large trust, for example, versus somebody who's in a standalone smaller school where arguably that pressure is more intense. So funding is on the list, long hours, and then staffing. And I think we could talk to anybody in any role and find that one of the key issues causing them stress is staffing. We all, any one of us who's got leadership responsibility will relate to that. I think what also has come out through the research, though, is that this role is a diverse one. It's a rich role and can be deeply fulfilling in terms of what you're doing in your day-to-day work and what that means to the communities that you serve. When we stand right back and look at the international research around well-being and workplace well-being specifically, we know that having a clear sense of purpose is the most important element and aspect of job satisfaction, and it indeed contributes very significantly to an individual's overall personal well-being. For those of us who are lucky enough to work in schools, that sense of purpose can be very sharp and very high because we can see directly what we're doing and how we're supporting children in a community. So there's a real opportunity for us to remember, I think, and reconnect with that sense of purpose and why we do what we do and who it is that we're doing it for. I think I'd also draw to your attention that by and large, the respondents to this research survey work were very positive about their ability to use support. They felt supported by their employers and they were accessing support. And that stands out for us because when we look at the wider school workforce, there's not always such good uptake of support. So really pleased and delighted that school business leaders are utilizing support that's there for them and feel and recognize that that support is there. And then just for me personally, I think the last thing I'll say on this is the particular point that I found most interesting, and I spend a lot of time looking at well-being and mental health research across the workforce in different pockets. But the thing that stood out to me here as really interesting was this question of isolation and school business leaders feeling isolated and quite separate. And we all know why that is. You know, you often are sat discrete separately from other school leaders or not necessarily as well connected as you might want to be with peers in other schools and other settings because you don't have the time often, and it may be that you don't have the networks. But this point about isolation, I think, is a really important one because it's something we can actively do something about, helping people find ways to tap into communities of practice, to connect with other peers who can understand exactly the issues that you're dealing with and facing, who can provide insight and support. There's nothing like being able to talk an issue through with someone who knows the ins and outs of it and has stood in those same shoes somewhere else. So I think for me, that's a real lever for us to think about how we can improve the well-being of our school business leaders. Well, it's going to be partly about ensuring that we keep building up those networks and keep making sure that colleagues are included and invited and encouraged, and actually in our own networks, that we tell colleagues that we participate in particular networks, that we do make time to attend CPD, whatever it is, so that becomes normal. And as Louise said, nobody's feeling guilty about stopping and taking the time to do that, because actually we are all better leaders when we make time for a bit of reflection, whether that's with peers or whether that's through vehicles like this. So I think that's probably, Louise, enough about the detail of the research. So I might hand back to you now for a bit more of the panel conversation.
Okay. Thanks, Sinead. I think they were the key things, obviously, in the report. And what I liked about the report is that there wasn't a whole ream of things that were causing distress. Ultimately, they were the key ones. They're generally what I know from the different networks I attend. They do try to address. I think ultimately the type of people that are employed as school business leaders, we can be our own worst enemies sometimes, in that, excessive workload and working hours. I think I'd be more worried if the research was coming back and saying that actually the employers, the school head teachers or whatever, CEOs, were demanding that those hours were worked, and that they felt like they were doing it sort of, I suppose, under duress, whereas ultimately some of it might actually be, and that's where I'll open up to Alison and Debbie as well, that actually we maybe need to be that bit tighter ourselves with our own time, and not constantly flogging ourselves, because we do have this full understanding of just what it means to those children for the school business leaders to do that job. And I think it's great to hear that the report pulled out that we're not feeling forced to do that by the employer, more inside ourselves. I don't know, Debbie, I don't know whether you want to come in there at all.
Sorry. No, I agree with everything you say. I think it's really interesting. I do think that there is an element of responsibility that we have to take, but I do realise that it's sometimes difficult to do that. In my own journey, I've learned the hard way. I've learned to work lots and lots of hours and not take breaks and take it home with me and worry about it. And I've learned that that's not good. It's not good for me and my well-being, and it doesn't make me a better practitioner either. It actually makes me less effective. I have days, I'm sure all of you can relate to this, where you are just what I call flailing, and you're just flicking from one thing to another. You can't stay focused, you're tired, and I felt it really impacted my focus. And so I think for me, the really important thing was, and which is what I've got from my employer, is that openness and that honesty with my employer, where I need to be honest myself and go and speak to them and say, I'm really struggling with this, and one of the things I did was put in place, this is where I work at home. So I work at home for one day every week. And that was an absolute game changer for me, because it gave me what I call my calibration day. It's my calibration day. It's my day. I've made it Wednesday, so nobody thought I was having a long weekend. And it gave me the opportunity to, on a Monday and a Tuesday, I'll consciously think, oh, I'll leave that till Wednesday. I'll leave that till Wednesday. And then when I come back after a Wednesday, I can sort of mop things up and tidy things up. And that's had a massive impact. And my head teacher was really supportive in that and can see the benefits of that as well. So that's some of my initial thoughts.
That's brilliant. And thank you for that practical advice, because ultimately the whole point of this session is to give practical ideas, tips. One thing that works for somebody might not work for somebody else, but it's just having those ideas. So thank you for that. I think our staff teams, our school business leaders are our most important assets, because ultimately we are behind the scenes making sure that everything goes on in the schools. And ultimately, when I was thinking about the positive focus on staff well-being at present, whereas, yes, we would say that we're flailing a lot of the time. We look like swans, don't we? But, you know, we do most of the time, where the little legs are going like that underneath. And that is, you know, part and parcel of the role. But ultimately, we need to make sure that if you think about it, the senior teams in every school, I am certain, will do a self-evaluation, a review, and the school development plan. And that is all around learning, teaching, and rightly so. But if you think about it, without having well, fit, happy staff who are keen to come to work and to look after the children in the best way they possibly can to actually deliver that development plan, then, you know, it's going to be much more difficult. So ultimately, if the teams actually sat down and made the time to do that piece of work to how we best look after our staff, which is something that I'm trying to do in my trust, then I think that could be key too. So yes, all of that has to be done, but ultimately start with the people. And I think that's the piece that gets forgotten about, because that is how we best impact the children. So that's just a little thing that we're trying to do. And I'm not saying we've got that cracked either, but it's just having that change of, I suppose, thought process, so that how do we best make sure our staff are looked after? Because ultimately that's how we're going to make sure the children are. Alison, don't know if you want to come in there.
Hi, sorry, I did miss a little bit of what Debbie said because I lost my connection. But just thinking about sort of staff, staff wellbeing, we do have a wellbeing working party in our school and we have a group of staff who are on that working party, and we've got both classroom-based staff and non-classroom-based staff who work on that. It was something that started before the pandemic, because I think now we talk about everything before the pandemic and after the pandemic, and it's sort of, I think, like a lot of things got lost during the pandemic, but I'm pleased to say that I've just recently seen an email going around asking staff again to be part of that working party, and that is to look after staff mental health and just seeing what we can do as an organisation to promote that, and putting some events on for staff that is all about their well-being and their mental health, and not necessarily having anything to do about the job. It's about just supporting staff to be themselves, and even outside of work, not just in work. I think that's very important. If you're not supporting your staff outside of work, they're not going to come into work and be their best selves when they're at work.
Lovely, thanks, Alison. I think in the report it talks about the excessive workload, working hours as point A, and point B is a lack of understanding from colleagues about the role. And I think a lot of that is interlinked, both points, because ultimately, if colleagues don't understand the role, they then don't understand the pressures they're putting on business leaders with some of their requests. So it was just really a question for the panel. Have you ever shared the variety or complexity of your role with all staff in school? I don't just mean leaders, I mean all staff in school. Because I think with that, I don't know whether you've been in a situation, I know I have, when you're having a chat to somebody, it might be at the Asda counter or whatever, and that's, oh, what do you do? Oh, well, I work in a school. Oh, are you a teacher? No. Oh, on the reception, and that is that it's either one or the other. And I think what we need to do is to change that narrative around the fact that, as I mentioned, within our trust, we have HR specialists, qualified specialists, finance, accountants, governance professionals, procurement specialists, IT, and it's that sort of narrative that I would like to have. So it's whether, in your own schools, have you shared that? Because I think the SLT and all staff within the school would benefit from it. Debbie, sorry, I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. No, I don't think I've really shared it with the whole school in depth. I am a member of the SLT, so that has helped them understand my role a lot better. And I'm very keen to make sure that, you know, on those inset days when we all come back on the 1st of September, you know, that all my colleagues are recognised for the work that they've done in the holidays, not just me, but my premises team or my admin assistants, that, you know, that the contribution they make to the wider school is acknowledged, and that's something that we do. And you know, we do have our children do come and visit us and to ask us what we do in our job, but obviously as a primary school it is limited as to what you can tell them and describe to them. But I do think trying to get that message across to everybody in the school is difficult, you know, and I'd be interested to hear, you know, if Alison's come across sort of scenarios that help with that.
I mean, we do have a document in school which is publicised for all staff to see, which in fact is for all members of SLT. So there's a section for me on there, and it does just list what I do, but I don't think that actually gives people enough information. And I think most people think that I deal with everything, really. I think that's probably how a lot of people will find, if anybody sort of any question they've got, they tend to come and ask me first. And I think as Louise alluded to earlier, even if it's not in my remit, I can't say to somebody, oh, you need to go and ask somebody else for that. I tend to go, oh, I'll sort it out for you, don't worry. And then you just look at the list and go, it's another one.
And I think that's where we do have to, you know, Alison, we do have to be that bit stricter with ourselves. And it's not about, you know, saying no. It's ultimately just about that educational piece, so that we can do that. One thing I was wondering, when we talk about, you know, positive mental health, we talk about the business leaders and being pivotal in each school, and we know they are. And the school office, for example, or business leaders' position in school is such a hive of activity, where I'm sure most staff will venture to at some point in the day or the week. And I honestly think it's so important to have those non-work related conversations with all staff, no matter who they are, what their role is. And I was wondering whether those office staff have any sort of mental health first aid training, because ultimately it's through those just general conversations that they can maybe spot things that might be different about a colleague, or might just show something where they're either struggling, you know, with pressures of work, or anything at all, any sort of isolation that they might feel. And I don't know whether that's something that could be prioritised in schools. And it's not to give the office staff another job, but ultimately they're really important conversations that might be totally non-work related, but really could help all staff. I didn't know if you've done anything like that, Alison.
We have in school, we have 2 mental health first aiders, which I think is really good. However, they're both teachers. And I know I've raised before that although, you know, they're very good at their role, being teachers,
yes,
they know exactly what goes on in the classroom, but they don't necessarily know what goes on outside of the classroom. And I've always thought we probably should also have someone who's not classroom based,
yes,
who's a mental health first aider as well, just like you mentioned there, Louise, to spot those things, because there's so much goes on in school that doesn't take place in the classroom. It's having somebody to support those staff as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to the chat, and Eileen, you've made a fantastic comment. Sometimes it looks like you're gossiping, but those conversations matter as people unload. And I think the conversations matter because people matter. And I think, you know, yes, I totally understand where you come from like that, but ultimately you're dead right. It's got to be so important that staff well-being, the social interaction, because if people don't have that opportunity for being social, then absolutely it's critical. And you know, I joke, but ultimately I keep going out to my team saying, when's the next night out, you know, and all of that. And obviously because it's all key to bonding and to feeling part of a group, that obviously we saw during the pandemic how important it was to feel part of that group, and especially when it was taken away. So I think whether it's those conversations where you ask about the family, or, you know, because then people open up, and something, you're dead right, Alison, people might not even know about. And how many of those conversations have school business leaders had to go to the head and say, actually, Alison, she just mentioned this morning, now I don't want you to do anything, but I want you to keep it on the radar in case you see something to look after it. And I think that's so key as well, because ultimately, and I will say this out loud, and I know it's being recorded, but ultimately business leaders are the most emotionally intelligent people within that school, because of their background, because of thinking of all the different areas. And they're interested in people. They're interested in the HR side of things because it's such a huge part of the job. So, I can't speak highly enough about that. I don't know how you feel about that, Debbie.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I completely agree with you. I think it's a really good idea to have somebody take on that training. Like Alison said, we have got a nurture teacher who's a HRTA, and she has undergone that training. One of the things that we do is I meet with my admin and premises team regularly, and obviously as an SLT, and as the teachers and the TAs meet. And at the start of every meeting, we always ask, is everybody okay? Is anybody aware of anybody or anything? And I'll say to my admin team, are you okay? Are you worried about each other? You can always come to me in confidence, or, if you want to speak to me, but are you worried about anybody else? Is there anybody else that's come into the office, that's spoken to you, and you're just thinking, oh my God, I'm really worried about them? Or even a parent, some of that parental behavior that we see, is there anything that's worrying you? And we always record that at the start of every meeting. And sometimes they will, after that meeting, they'll come back and say, oh, I didn't want to say it in the meeting, but and then we can relay that, and we will discuss it, and it'll be everything. It'll be, oh, so-and-so's brother's in hospital at the moment, and just keep an eye on them. We will discuss that as an SLT, so that we're aware of things that are going on with all our colleagues around the school, to keep an eye on them, and to just sort of be aware of it, because things do spill over from life as well as what goes on in school, and everybody matters to us, and it's important that we look after that. So that's some of the things that we do, but we can always build on that and make it better.
Sorry, everyone, I'm just laughing. Obviously, as a true school business leader, we have our lights on timer, and I never even thought about that when doing this webinar. So if I keep going in the dark, it's not anyone putting the lights off, it's probably us and our finance person got them set up. I'm just noticing in the chat, Louise has put in there, mental health first aid is so important. However, I'm finding that wellbeing and mental health doesn't seem to be taken seriously in our small school. I joined in September and really want to change this. Any suggestions appreciated? Feel free, everyone, to, we have almost 100 attendees on the call, which is brilliant, to put that yourselves. This is not us preaching to you. But ultimately, I think when I first see that, what I would like to say is, when we talk about changing that narrative, it might well be, do we look at the absence statistics? Do we sit down as that group and actually say, right, what could be impacting on absence, attendance? Is there anyone who might be a little bit wobbly because of something they've got going on? How can we help them? And, what services can we go to help them? But it might even just be, come and have a cup of coffee. And I think that's key. And I do understand that in different school contexts, things might be different, and how each head teacher is different too. But there are all sorts, as you say, lots of different tips within the report. But also, I think it's key to know that there is always that open door policy. And when we're talking about looking at staff and as them, it's pretty twee to say they're a most important asset. I don't like staff being thought of as assets. They are our schools, aren't they? Ultimately, with their attitudes to life, and to how they look after our children and each other within the school. That's then the culture of the school. And I think that's how you can start to change it, even just by how you are with people. Because ultimately, if you are like that yourself, then people will then hopefully try and mirror that behavior. I'm just looking here at Paula's reply. introduce wellbeing boxes into staff toilets, so deodorant, hair clips, just to show that you're thinking about people. It's been much appreciated, didn't cost a lot. And I suppose in times of economic crisis, then isn't that just a lovely small thing that you can do? So it's, I suppose it is treats like that. Alison, do you have any ideas?
Well, we actually run a scheme in school where staff can nominate their colleagues. You know, if they think, you know, somebody might have gone over and above to help somebody, or somebody might have had that conversation with somebody where somebody said, you know, that they're feeling a bit low or they've got something going on, and you can nominate that person. And nobody knows who's nominated you or why. You get a bar of chocolate. Or a packet of, I once got a packet of Rolos that was really pricey. I've got no idea why. But do you know what a difference that made to my week? How sad that is, that this packet of Rolos, but it did. It boosted my spirits to think that somebody else here had obviously thought that I'd had a bad week, or I'd maybe done something that I just thought was part of my job, but perhaps or whatever. I think part of it was the fact that I didn't know why I'd got them. It would be nice to know why, but just the fact that I got them, and every week we have that where staff will nominate their colleagues, and people get bars of chocolate.
I think as well, it's all about the positivity of that, isn't it? And I think as soon as anybody mentions mental health, there's a negative connotation to it. Whereas actually it's about promoting positive mental health and the steps that we can take to prevent anyone from having any sort of negative mental health when they're working with us. And I think that's the message we need to try and get across. That looking after people's mental health is not that we're trying to, you know, pull up the bootstraps and say, you know, how we're going to try and improve people. It's ultimately trying not to let them get that into that negative situation in the first place. So I don't know, Debbie, do you have any other suggestions for that?
Yeah, I meant to say we do have the wellbeing meetings across the school where people from all roles take part in that. But we've got a wellbeing notice board in our staff room where people can stick a post-it note and they'll say, I'd like to thank, you know, whoever today because they just made me smile, or I'd like to thank so-and-so today because they helped me when I needed them in the corridor. And so they just stick up post-it notes in the in there. So there's no reward for it as such, but it just a reward in itself, isn't it? Getting that sort of thank you that's shared publicly, I suppose. So that's been really impactful. And I think it's really important that that we don't, I don't know if I can say this, that we don't say that we're doing wellbeing and paying lip service to it, that it actually is meaningful and it does mean something. And I think I'm constantly sort of reminding SLT that that's okay to think that you're good at addressing well-being, but are you? Do you really think you are? How do you know you are? Is it meaningful? Is it purposeful? Is it having the right impact? And our staff coming into school feeling that it's a really great place to be and they want to be there? Are your visitors coming into your school and saying, wow, this is a really great place, you know, to be?
You can feel it, can't you?
Yeah, so that it runs through that ethos and your values across the school and for the children and the staff and the visitors and everybody. Yeah,
because I think ultimately, yes, schools are graded in particular ways by our Ofsted friends, but ultimately, if you could realistically think that you got an outstanding grade for how you look after your staff and how your staff feel looked after, then that would take your school miles and put you well ahead of lots of others, because, you know, that is the key, because that's then how you attract and retain really good staff. And so they don't want to go anywhere else. And I think that's what we need to concentrate on. So when we're talking about how difficult it is to change that culture in a small school, for example, we could even, you know, dress it up as you need to, whether it's around staff recruitment and retention, so that they can see a dramatic difference, perhaps, just because of the way that they're behaving towards staff. And again, you know, there's all sorts of different titles for things like being the employer of choice, but actually that's really important. And you know yourself, when you meet someone at any point, whether you want to be in their company or not. And that's exactly the same, whether you're an employer. And I think it's the general feeling. And I know we've been to conferences about mood hoovers and all of that. You don't want that to be the ethos that you feel when you walk into a school. It's got to be that positivity. And we're all busy. I'm not saying we're not. And we're all, it is a pressured situation that's ever changing. But that's probably the only thing that's never going to change. Schools are always going to be like that. I think we just have to accept that and try and do as we can with regards to workload. So I don't know, Alison, have you done anything in school about workload where you've addressed anything? And sorry, I should have probably said this to everyone at the start. We haven't discussed any of these answers beforehand. Yeah, this is all news to me when I'm asking the ladies the questions.
Well, I think I feel very lucky about how my workload has been addressed, because like everybody, I had a massive workload. I was finding I was taking work home with me, working on a weekend. Even used to get into trouble off my husband because we'd go away on holiday, and the next thing he'd say, "What are you doing? Are they work emails you're reading?" I've got a deputy school business manager started in September, and that has made a massive difference to my workload, because it's made a difference to a few things. One, because I've been able to offload some of the workload that I had to her. But also, I feel now as if I'm not alone in school. I have got somebody in school who shares my role and understands my role, and somebody who I can talk to. So for me, that's just been a massive help, just having that deputy. And I think that's something anybody should consider. If you've got a massive workload, is going to your head teacher and just talking about your workload and how another member of staff in your office team can help. Because I think everybody, you can always justify a member of classroom staff, but it's justifying another member of admin staff.
And I appreciate, how tight budgets are. And I know some of our smaller schools wouldn't be able to run to that. But what we are doing is we're investing in an apprenticeship scheme, a school business manager apprenticeship scheme. So we've got 6 members of our admin teams in different schools around the region who are aspiring school business managers. And ultimately, we struggle if we have an experienced business manager leave the trust. So we're investing in the future and trying to grow our own and mold our own. So again, that they don't leave, and they are now embarking, tomorrow they start on their school business manager apprenticeship. So they're existing members of staff going for this qualification, but also to find out about what it's really like to be a business manager, to get the theory behind it, so that when a role comes up, it gives them the confidence to be able to apply, and then gives the leaders in that school the opportunity of taking somebody on that can hit the ground running, which is so important as well. So we'll hopefully retain those people, invest in them, make them feel that value. And that's what I was going to suggest really about the CPD element. So it's important for school business leaders to get their CPD, no matter what level. And if you're not able to, I know it's hard when you're the only person, say, in a small school on an administration role, but ultimately you will do a better job with that CPD. And it's thinking of creative ways to be able to get that CPD for yourself or for your staff. So I don't know, Debbie, have you got any examples of that?
One of the things, I don't know if you were going to talk about it later or not, but I started up and for all my sins, and I'm the chair of the South Gloucestershire School Business Leaders Group, which brings together SBMs, and I know Alison does something very similar, where it brings together school business leaders across our county, and that has been massive. We've got a portal, an online portal, where people share everything. There's just discussions every single day. There's just discussions about anything. You can go on there, say, I need a carpenter, and 3 quotes come. People go, I recommend. So that's saving time. It's also providing a platform for those that are new to the role to be able to reach out to those of us that have got more experience, We have face-to-face meetings as well, where we particularly target CPD speakers, networking opportunities for people to link up with one another. We do provide support. I often will go and provide one-to-one peer-to-peer support in a sort of coaching or mentoring capacity as well. And I'm working with my colleagues to do that as well across the group. So that's what we're doing in a wider context across our county. And I love it that our group call our portal the SBM Google, because it's pretty much, if you need to know it and you don't know what to do, you can go there. And then in my school, I think it is really important to tap into that those skills within your team. Admittedly, I'm a bigger school, a 420 place primary school. I can imagine it is more difficult when you're in a smaller school, of course. But I have developed those staff over the years to take on more of my operational work. We have a document where everybody's role is listed along with their job description, including mine. And we have listed all of our jobs that we do so that we can see that the roles are balanced. We all have an understanding of what we're trying to do, but also it gives clear guidance about if people want CPD or training in any of those particular areas. And over the years, I feel really proud that I've sort of developed my team for their own sense of sort of well-being and professional development to take on more. And they've really enjoyed it as well and continue to enjoy it. And we continue to look at that year on year and support one another with that. And I'm forever grateful to them because they're able to help me, and I can see them growing, and I'm really grateful to them, and they can see how happy it makes me as well. So it's kind of like a win-win situation, really.
Yeah. And that's great, Debbie. And I think that was one of the conclusions of the report, in that well-being is greatly affected by the support networks that you have. So it might well be, one or two people who, when we look at, the percentages of who actually say, it's workload, it's the amount of hours. And sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you just don't know where to start to try and think, how on earth am I going to get rid of some of this, or to stop it from piling up every single day? And I think it's having somebody, not being afraid to have somebody, just ask them to come and have a look and see if they've got any ideas or for what they can do to help. Because when you're in it, it's so difficult to see the wood for the trees. And what I find from this profession, and again, in Sinead's report, it comes out loud and clear, is that we are very supportive of each other. And we're actually very protective of each other. And I just saw one comment in the chat there about from Sarah, who said that if I actually mention anything about my workload in a sort of negative way or ask for a bit of support, the head just takes away responsibility. So now they're frightened to actually to mention that. So rather than take away low-level tasks that they don't need to be doing, one way of perhaps Sarah putting that over is actually saying, I'm a well-paid person to be doing these low-level tasks. What I want to be involved in is the strategic elements. And in some of our smaller schools, when they did convert and join us, what I actually saw was that you would have a well-paid school business manager looking after the school, but doing everything. They were the one person within a small school. So they answered the door, they got the postman, absolutely everything. But ultimately, they're being very well paid to answer the door, whereas really the head teacher needed their support on a strategic level, and they weren't able to give that. No way. So ultimately, we looked at apprentices who would be able to do that lower level. So we're investing in the local region, we're investing in the people and the apprenticeships. And as I keep saying, growing our own. And that then allowed a bit of time for the school business manager to then concentrate on having a massive, much better impact on what they're actually paid to do. And it gave them a much better self-worth. It made the head teacher appreciate why they've got a school business manager. And it really did help. So that was a win-win situation. So that definitely came up where through the support, get somebody in to have a look at what you're doing And that doesn't, that can just be somebody from a neighbouring school who you're a friend of, anything at all. And as long as you're brave enough to do that, then that could be really helpful. Okay, thank you.
Louise, I was just going to say that actually the ISBL's professional standards was a real gateway for me, because I sat down and did them with my head teacher as part of my performance management.
Brilliant.
And he suddenly realised, he thought, oh my goodness, this is what you could be doing. This is what you are doing. This is what I'd love you to be able to do, because it's going to take all of that away from me and I don't have to do it anymore. And I can be more focused on what I want to do. And that was a massive gateway for me, because he realised I needed some training or to be upskilled to be able to do some of those things. But it really shaped his understanding of what the SBM role is. I don't know, my experience, heads are quite proud people, and they like to be feel very proud of their staff and the people that work for them. And he really took that on board and helped me to sort of evolve from that. So I found, because I can see that person has said that they've already said it to them outright, but he didn't see their value. That really helped me get my head to understand what the role was and what do you want me to do? Do you want me to be on reception, or do you want me to take away all the health and safety from you so you never have to worry about it anymore? And he's like, oh yeah, take it, so it is those kind of conversations that it does. So that was really useful for me.
And I think that sometimes, and dare I say this as well out loud, sometimes the head teachers can hide behind doing the health and safety and that side of things, rather than being in the classroom, getting with the teaching staff, improving the teaching and learning. And I think that there is sometimes that, and I'm not saying anything that I wouldn't say to them. And ultimately, the whole point of a school business manager role, we've got the expertise, we're qualified in it, let us get on with it. And ultimately, we need to make sure that we're trying to give that message as nicely but as firmly as we can about the fact that actually you might not be qualified, we are. And I think in many ways, when we converted to become a large trust, and obviously the schools pay a contribution to the central team for its existence. And when they said to us, well, what do we get for our contribution to joining the trust? Well, actually, you get qualified people that you haven't got access to in schools, because ultimately it's a much larger team. So it's the way that we need to do that. And any ideas, great, about the link for the ISBL standards. Yes, Jackie will arrange to get that. Oh, they're on there already. Thank you, Eileen. There we go. I've gone out in the door again. So we just need to sort that. So I'm appreciating the time. I don't know if there's anything else anybody wants us to cover. If you want to put anything like that in the chat, please do. Debbie, are there any final words from yourself?
No, as lonely a job as it can be, reach out, really do reach out, see if you can find a local network. And there's all sorts of other sort of scenarios that there are there. We're working closely with another school up the road, and actually she comes to work with me one day a term and I'll go into work with her one day a term. Absolutely brilliant. We save the jobs that we're not sure about doing, we do them together. Could you do that? I mean, I found that really useful. We just sit there and go, oh, this is so great, because we get one another, and we just, squish into our offices and just share a day together, working together. So maybe you could find someone that you could do that, because that's a really lovely thing to do as well and supports your well-being.
Okay, thank you. Alison. Oh, are we having problems with Alison's technology? Sinead, while we're waiting for Alison, is there anything you want to say finally?
Just really interesting conversation. Lovely to hear all of the things that Debbie and Alison are doing and suggesting to colleagues. I think there's a lot there about culture, and it's really important to not get overwhelmed by the idea of culture. Culture is a series of small behaviors that we all make one after the other, and all of you in your roles have the opportunity to shape culture through your own behaviors, and there's no better place to start. I think I particularly liked the examples that Debbie and Alison gave around appreciation. It sounds a bit trite maybe to say, but I think appreciation is a really easy strategy to use. And whilst we might all want to receive it, one of the best things we can do is just put it out into the mix to others, and you'd be amazed how quickly it comes back. So really interesting conversation. Great to hear from Alison and Debbie.
Okay, thank you. Alison, are you back with us?
I think I'm back. It all went a bit funny there. I mean, I'd just like to finish by really just saying, don't be afraid to ask for help, because I think there's always somebody else who's probably thinking exactly the same or feeling the same way as you, and there's always somebody else out there who can help, somebody who's already been there and resolved that, or can point you in the right direction. So a bit like Debbie mentioned before, up here in Durham, we've got our group chat, and there's some great chat goes on in there, people sharing ideas, people asking for help, and there's always somebody there that will help you if you just ask, and don't be afraid to.
Lovely, thank you. And I, in closing, I think as a school business leader, I hope you feel how much I feel that this is such a dynamic, exciting and supportive profession. I think it's imperative that the children in our schools know how much we value our roles, and as their role models, and remember that we are their role models in school as well, not just teachers. You never know, we might hear some of the children in school say, one day I want to be a school business leader. We hear them say that as teachers all of the time, and that would give me so much pleasure, and it is rewarding. We're in a privileged position, but we're not saying it's not hard. Yes, it is. And we are making a difference every day. And that might sound trite, but it's absolutely true. And every single thing we do in a school makes a difference. And I think what I like, thank you, Sinead, we don't even realize what we're doing for mental health. And what you mentioned there about an appreciation strategy, I hadn't even realized it was a strategy. When we say we just do it. And I think that's the piece where if we put it down on paper, and then we start to think as a team what we do to help our staff and ourselves and to promote the positivity of being in our schools. I literally think you'll be amazed at how much you already do for mental health and well-being in schools. But I think the report itself, I was thrilled to read it, because it does hone in on what we need to continue to do to make sure that the positive mental health of the staff in schools both improves, maintains, and really does thrive. So thank you for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. I can't believe the time has flown so much. But I think that you got the sense of everyone's passion for the profession. So thank you for that. If you've got any further questions, then please come to us. We're happy to take them. As we say, we're supportive. And if there's anything else you want to get in touch with, then please do. And from Education Mutual's point of view, if you have somebody who is struggling within your school, or who you just want to appreciate, then please just refer to one of the services. We're always looking for new ideas of how we can help the school business leaders and the school staff across the board. So any ideas, please keep them coming through to Education Mutual too. But thank you for your time, and see you soon. Thank you.